And we're gonna close up this day with a digital circle with our amazing guest speakers, John Kim and Eric Lazenby, Raghu, David Lasher. Welcome back to the sessions, and myself as well. So the digital circle is going to be around how marketing and sales are now different in life sciences, and if no-code technologies can actually help us. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining the session with me. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen so I can all see you. And welcome to the circle. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
All right, perfect. So, just to kick this conversation off, let's probably start with a simple question, right? And anyone who feels eager to start, please jump in. So first of all, what we'd like to know is what is actually the biggest change in the commercial operations in life sciences that happened due to the pandemic, right? And how do you see companies react to these changes?
John, do you want to take that? I'll defer to John because he's actually, he's senior executive in the industry, seeing everything, responding to the changes. So let's hear from John first.
Yeah, thanks for that, David, and Alex. Thanks for having us this morning. I think the two biggest things are certainly a significant shift in how information is being delivered. So making sure, it's always been the goal to make sure it's relevant, insightful, and informative. But I think now it's just the medium in which it's being delivered. So certainly a big shift to digital. I think that's the first piece that shouldn't catch anyone by surprise. But I think the second one is agility. Anyone who's worked in commercial operations understands there's a number of moving parts. And in order to make sure that information is not only relevant and informative, it has to be timely. And that requires an enormous amount of agility, both in terms of the data sets, the operations, and ultimately the ability to execute. And just as we've seen from other industries about this kind of shift towards real-time and relevant information, I think you've seen within the life sciences industry over the last 18 months an incredible job of not only making that transformative shift towards digital delivery, but also then doing it in a way in which it's complementing the field sales efforts, because at the end of the day, it is it's a complementary approach that ultimately delivers the best overall outcomes for not only companies but also for the healthcare system and for patients. So to me, the two biggest things are certainly digital and agility. And so when you kind of relate that back to what we'll talk about today, I think the more agile the back-end operations can be, the more efficient and the more effective that we can actually deliver information and ultimately make an impact for everyone involved.
Interesting. And Raghu, since you're coming from a little bit of a different side of the table, right? Can you share a little bit of your experience? What does CCS see as the biggest change in the commercial operations?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. See, from our side, right? Even we work with industry from both the sides. So we need to categorize and understand this entire commercial ecosystem into maybe stakeholder wise, right? What HCPs are really looking for, or what physicians are really looking for, what sales and marketing guys are looking for, and what payers are doing, how this patient centricity is evolving, right? So the patient centricity has made everything relook, right? Entire the commercial operation has been changed. How we deal with the patient, how we talk to a patient, engage a patient, and vis-a-vis how we engage a HCP, how we personalize the content to them, right? Everything. Because see, if you see, there is a new coin or a new phenomena has arrived, is a boundaryless territories, right? A sales guy sitting in India can talk to a person virtually anywhere in the globe, or from US they can talk or attend any conference or events, right? That has changed completely. And the reason is before it was X percentage of digital adoption. Now we have seen 10X kind of digital adoption across the commercial value chain, and everybody are accepting the change. and sitting in front of the computers, listening to what new things are happening. Now they are everybody are giving time. This is mostly on a positive side, but obviously on other side we see little in-person contact has come down and those things. But the digital adoption has grown up, and everywhere, like what physicians are looking for a XR kind of events, conferences, mixed reality, virtual reality conferences, how I enter a booth, because we were working with one of the pharma company on how we enter a booth and what kind of therapies they look for, what information, and subsequently how the patient can be treated. So everything is changed. So I'll stop here, Alex, and
Thanks, Raghu. Eric, can you share something with us?
Absolutely. Thank you. So my history, I have a 20-year history as a field sales rep in big pharma, followed by now near 3 years in medical device as an independent sales rep. So that means I'm commission only. So I can offer it. During my time in big pharma, I called on hospitals and doctors' offices. So I can offer kind of a perspective from both from pharma and from medical device in doctors' offices and also in hospitals. And I think that some of the biggest changes that I've seen and that my colleagues have seen and friends of mine that are in pharma have seen, number one is the most obvious would be the complete shutdown of access to doctors. And that was a big deal. And then we asked a lot of our customers in a very short period of time in order to, let us engage with you virtually, let us, open our emails. And my colleagues have complained that only 1% to 2%, maybe 3% of their emails actually get opened. That many times the email address that is shared is kind of the junk email address or the office email address. You're not getting the super secret email address of that goes straight to the doctor. And I think that in asking that ability to engage with them digitally, we also asked about we asked them to have technical knowledge and technical skill that many of them did not have. So my colleagues have been, explained to me that part of their skill set is now required to be technical knowledge, not only for the tools and services that they were presented with, but also to help their customers get connected. I can hear them, but they can't hear me. And I always solve that problem in order to make this happen. So then, in addition to that, as we've moved more towards a digital engagement of any kind, whether that's going to be direct marketing in Facebook, right? Or more likely in a virtual engagement like we're having now, that engagement is very different because it's more intentional. It's planned. It's much more intentional. So I think what a big change is that the demand for the audience, the doctors now, are demanding that engagement be relevant to them. When it was a physical engagement, I could go by the office, I could go by the hospital, I would catch as catch can, and maybe I would even know sometimes who I was going to see was walking through a hospital. And that engagement is friendly and if it's haphazard and I'll get a couple of points in on my product. But when it comes to virtual, you better be ready. You've got to have something that's right for that person or they're just not going to re-engage with you. That's what
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Alex, let me test a hypothesis. Today kicked off with a presentation, a point of view that I shared, but there was a theory in it. And I'd like to hear John and Eric in particular, also Raghu, but John and Eric being in the industry respond, which is that it would seem that for med reps to be successful going forward, and this builds on what Eric was just saying, is that med reps need to be more like what my career has been, a consultant. It's more consultative sales. It's not just dropping off samples and push in pamphlets and information. It's engaging, being relevant, and asked back. What do you think about this hypothesis that the field force, the reps, whether in-house or contracted, right, independent like Eric, need to be enabled to engage in consultative sales in a way that is much different than it was 2 years ago? John?
Yeah, David, I couldn't agree more with that. As Eric was describing, you have to be ready and be right. You also be relevant. If you want some engagement, whether it's in person or virtual, the better informed you are and the better information you have, the more of an impact that you can have in that conversation. And I think you really start to invite someone who's either face to face or over a computer screen to really want to engage with you and want to continue to engage with you. As we know, in the consultative space, it's very often you build that relationship over time, but you do it because you're a trusted subject matter expert. And the only other aspect I would say that I think is even more critical than what we're talking about here is it's one thing if it's an employee. It's another if it's a contracted sales relationship or contract sales organization. I think in that regard, you need it even more because you're trying to build up that relationship and build up that knowledge base in a much shorter period of time. But I think both situations are very applicable to what we're talking about here today.
Eric?
So the answer, yes, absolutely. If you're more of a consultative sales rep, I think that by definition it would mean that you're a good listener and that you are taking in information that you're learning about a particular doctor, a particular group, a particular hospital, and then going to be able to figure out a way to best meet those needs. And I do think that that's where, we talked about agility before, or was talked about. And I think that that's where, Creatio and your product, David, in Keen 360, particularly with the KLS product, can really shine because the things that I've been hearing from customers has really been about flexibility, agility, speed to market. And as sales reps, when we're in that environment, there's a lot of information that can be gathered. For example, the doctor's managed care makeup, how much a particular pharmacy is being influenced, is influencing that person's that person's prescribing habits, what their contracting is like. And a lot of this stuff is not exactly evident online or in other avenues. You kind of have to be there and listen to the conversations and understand and so forth. And I think that there's an opportunity to not only be a consultative sales rep, but also to gather that information and pass to John, to people in headquarters who then have the ability to use it and figure out a way to be a better service. I think in that consultative part of it, there also has to be mentioned the ever-present, completely oppressive regulatory and legal compliance part of this. The FDA, the OIG, the DOJ, everybody's, as a pharma company, as a medical device company, you've got to be extremely careful to ensure that you're not stepping on or getting close to any sort of laws. And I can say that in my career, we've come up with some great ideas, what you call these no-brainer ideas, and everybody gets excited, and we send it over to legal, and it gets kabah, and it's like, nope, can't do that. But to your point and to your hypothesis, I think it is true, very much so, that we have to get better, not just closer to our customers, not just meeting them where they are, but meeting them where they are with what they need. And I think that's sort of a definition of helpful and consultative selling.
Yeah, so I completely agree, Eric, on that. To add to your points, right? So we have often seen these pharmaceutical companies are trying to reduce the sales guys' mundane work through might be a robotic automation process or leveraging AI-led microservices areas, or any kind of automation, right, which a mundane kind of work can be taken care of, so that the sales guy actually puts his complete focus on understanding more from a product perspective or a research update perspective, where they can pass it on to particular physicians or doctors. That's one. And also the trainings or the focus are happening on how to leverage these applications, or how to leverage a social CRM, or how to engage a physician through multi-channel marketing activities by sales rep. This focus, right? So it need not be one channel where a sales guy always focuses and adheres to give information to these doctors, but he's a single point of contact for him as well as the physician as well as the organization. So the thin line between marketing and sales guys is also coming up, where these campaigns or a social CRM, connected CRM, so everything is built means everything can be taken care by sales guy himself to large extent, and pass it on to the, if needed, the sales guy will pass it on to the subsequent next level. So that entire omni-channel kind of connect, right? That is one. Reducing or focusing on core activities of the sales guys, like how to take care of these travel expenses by RPA kind of scenario, right? How to take his route planning, territory management, updating sales guy master data, right? So these things are taken care. And also suppose a sample requirement or particular kind of campaign information, a chatbot, a virtual sales assistant will address those things for HCP, and where the sales guy actually focuses on a second level or a more matured kind of communications. That's what we are seeing, and we have seen major implementations are going on, big digital transformations are going on these areas. And also there is a trend, right, which we have seen in large Europe and US pharma and even Japanese pharma as well. They are building a global unified contact centers using chatbots, right? And it looks like a one sales guy taking care of multiple mundane kind of queries across globe, addressing HCP and leaving large amount of focused, dedicated, and good time for a sales guy to manage their physicians. Yeah.
Interesting, very interesting thoughts, gentlemen, to be honest. So, David, do you want to also kind of get the ball rolling here?
I have a question I want to pose to John and Eric. I've been looking forward to this because it's a little like a boxing ring, okay? And the tension here and the fight it's classic, and I want to hear whether John and Eric see anything changing in this classic tension. And the tension is between that which the home office is looking for and wants and decides to fund, right, IT or otherwise, trying to enable the field force, which is what Eric represented, right, and represents. But the field force has never classically been very satisfied, shall I say, with what gets rolled out by home office, right? I mean, home office is trying, but the field force has typically needed something more flexible than what they receive. And before I turn it over to hear the home office versus field kind of perspectives, the question is, where can we get going forward with more agile platforms like you can get with no code, right? Is there a chance to reduce this classic tension and do things like, for example, instead of having the field force dominate what's in the CRM platform, I'm just going to use that for shorthand, allowing a team like key accounts or the medical liaisons to have CRM solutions that on one platform support all these different teams, right? And maybe bring them together for more collaborative consultative sales. So let's open up the boxing ring and hear how the field and home office feels about that classic tension and maybe opportunities going forward. John, home office, do you want to start?
Yeah, certainly. I think it is a collaborative approach. I think that ultimately yields the best outcomes. If I think about any of the discussions I've been involved with around promotional promotional review process, clear through to interacting with the field, the best discussions start and end with not only the patient but then the provider in mind, making sure that you can get the right information out there. And so, David, I think the key here is making sure you do it in not only a compliant way, but that you've got the agility in the back office, if you will, to enforce the compliance and to make sure it's being done properly. But I do think there's many ways to innovate in order to ensure that we are continuing to provide the best information. But in my experience, having done this quite a bit across hundreds of colleagues in the field, it really is a collaborative approach. And to me, one of the biggest things we did, both currently and in the past, is to make sure we've got great field engagement and that we're constantly communicating. I think the best commercial operations teams are the ones that continue to focus on the home office, but are out in the field. They're doing the ride-alongs, or attending the sales meetings, etc. And the reason I feel that way is that's where the dialogue occurs. The last thing we want to do is roll something out that we think is great, and ultimately it causes field sales team members, or folks, if you will, like Eric, a lot more headaches, and then and vice versa. I think that's the key to success, is that collaboration. But Eric, I'm curious, from your perspective, what you've seen as well.
Sure, I think it definitely is a collaborative effort. And in my experience, I'm thinking about a 20-year span now. I saw more and less collaboration over the course of my experience. And most of the collaboration will be done pertaining to sales techniques and sales strategy in what are a subsection of sales ops called disease management team. And some disease management teams are better than others in terms of understanding the customer and what that presentation flow should be like. Over the course of my career, I think that big pharma, in my case, became much more understanding of that necessary collaborative effort. And I can tell you that I don't feel like it was and from a sales strategy, it was really never that bad in terms of the boxing match that you're describing. I think it might have been more in the area that came out, things that would come out of sales ops that were time consuming and sort of check the box types of activities that really didn't add to putting numbers on the bottom line. And I think those types of things could be somewhat frustrating to a lot of sales reps. What surprises me was how little interaction sometimes people in sales ops, or even on disease management teams, and the people, the support staff, and all the group that surround them. What does surprise me is how little actually interaction they get with sales reps. And what I found was the people you think that sales ops is really over sales ops, but there are a few sections and people sort of in their way that are very protective of the field force. They're protective of the field force time. They're protective of, they don't want marketing calling them every 5 minutes and asking them questions and, all of this. They want to keep that to a minimum. And then sometimes it does affect the outcomes of what we're offered. But by and large, I believe that companies have become much more engaging with departments have become much more engaging with each other, understanding that the work product has got to hit right. And I did notice that, in pharma career and now in medical device as an independent rep, those companies have more interest in what I have to offer than ever before, because they tend to be smaller, more innovative companies. And to your point earlier, that flexibility, the agility, the speed to market, the ability to make changes to your system quickly is right where Creatio, and in particular, I think Team 360 fits. That's what I've seen so far.
Raghu, you seen anything in the home office in the field?
Yeah. So the other side of the coin, right? So we got engagement on various maybe change management kind of scenarios, or how to enhance the virtual offices of a sales guys and marketing guys, leveraging various tools, technologies. So that's one area. And also the change management, right? So training them, making them comfortable of leveraging these solutions, applications are very, very, very important, because unless until that is been done, the usage can't be put in a practice, right? So that's an area as well. We have also seen and how to make a sales guy, right, center of all campaigns, marketing, patient centricity, right? So companies are looking at that kind of scenario. They have probably identified the problem, which I think Eric was also trying to mention, and they are working towards to have an integrated CRM, right, kind of scenario, where that person will become a CEO of that territory, right? Probably all channels, marketing will be driven through this particular sales guy, or a medical MSLs, or key account managers, right? So that's happening, and the tools and technologies like Creatio would definitely helping those kind of scenarios.
What about another classic problem or challenge, which is moving from clinical to commercial, right? For an established company, of course, it might be a new drug that's being released, right? And need to get it out to the targeted market. And of course, for a startup, and I was having a conversation less than 24 hours ago with a startup that's aiming to go IPO this spring, February, March, and they're beginning to figure out, how they're confident of where they are in the FDA approval cycle, so they're beginning to talk about how do we launch our commercial team. John and Eric, in particular, again, like that transition from clinical to commercial, that's always been a challenge. Has it been changed? What's most needed that you're seeing these days?
David, I think that the key there is speed, right? As those activities, can kind of take shape, and things can obviously you want to make sure you have the appropriate time to plan and execute. But the key to me there is making sure you've got speed, as we talked about earlier, just the agility. But it's also the capabilities, right? And especially as a small organization, we don't have an enormous amount of infrastructure or capabilities, but we still have the same requirements and needs as a big company. And so when you look at having off-the-shelf solutions that have not only the right capabilities built in, but require as little level of expertise, whether it's from a coding perspective or just from an overall operational standpoint, to me, that's the key. Is to be able to get something off the shelf. It's pre-configured. I can plug it in. I know what data sets it works with. I've got great consulting partners that I can leverage, because ultimately my core competency should be the science and the ultimately the benefits that we're bringing to market. It shouldn't necessarily be that we're technological experts, but kind of to round it out, to me, it very much is that off-the-shelf plug-and-play capability, and requires as little coding, as little technological capabilities, and then having a great set of partners who can come in and help you lay the pavement to ultimately roll those systems out and commercialize the product.
Eric, field perspective?
Okay. Yeah, that was excellent. It's so interesting when the headquarter guys talk, they sound like headquarter guys for sure. So forgive me, but I'm just so impressive. You just, wow. Yeah. So, in terms of product launch, I did many launches. And so from a field perspective, I could say that sometimes there's an assumption of clinical knowledge. If you're going to launch a product, you've just got to make sure that two things happen. You've got to make sure that your sales reps, your field force understands how to use the tools that they've been given, backwards and forwards. So onboarding, very, very important. And then there needs to be an absolute commitment to clinical knowledge. When you get in front of a doctor for the first time to explain a product for the first time, you must be ready. And that means you've dedicated yourself to understanding your product backwards and forwards. So, and I think that technology can play a role in that, with different testing and quizzes to make it fun. I think that as you launch a product, and this is kind of to John's point, there never seemed to be enough time or enough data. And I think that with the flexibility that John is describing, there might be an opportunity to provide more information and more data. For example, managed care makeup and even different pieces of data for different parts of the country that have some patient populations and access and so forth. So I think that to answer your question, I think that a commitment to clinical knowledge is critical, and then just the ability that the sales rep has to utilize the tools that they've been given in a launch environment.
Raghu, any perspective on that, clinical to commercial? What are you seeing from your business and your part of the world?
Yeah, so it's a interesting journey, David, on that, because previously it was a little, I would not say it was a difficult task.
I think we might be experiencing some technical issues here.
Alex, do we have some connectivity issues? All right.
Yeah, looks like it.
All right. While the internet bounces back, we have just a couple minutes. People versus tools.
Maybe.
Raghu, I think we're having trouble on our end, so I'm going to pose another question to John and Eric, and it's kind of a people versus tools kind of question. I'm relatively new to the life sciences industry, and what's manufacturing was most of my background, my early background. And so what was interesting to me was learning this word detailing, right? And detailing, for those not in the industry, means giving a presentation. That's what it really means in layman's terms. And it seems like there was a real heavy focus on having the right detailing tools and knowing exactly what slide was presented to providers and how many seconds did everybody spend on this slide versus that slide. And I don't think that's, and it seems to me that was over focus on tools and overly much faith in what that data from the presentations, from the detailing was telling you. Do you think, in detailing in particular, do you think maybe the pendulum swung too far? Do you think it's a little different right now? And I'm saying, and like, how much of success of a life sciences company and its field force, how much of it is tools and how much of it is people? So that's a pretty big question, but John?
Yeah, I'll kind of start, and then Eric, I'd love your insight on this as well, because I think I can certainly provide the headquarters view in terms of that. But ultimately, I think, Eric, the time you've spent out in the field will complement kind of what I'll provide as well. David, here's what I think. I think you can have all the technology in the world. I think you can over or under analyze any problem. To me, you have to be able to have the right tools in place, but just as much as the tools, right, and the technology, it does come down to having the right strategy and the right people. And so I see it as a complement, it's a complementary approach. But the on the analysis piece, I've seen things that have just been way overanalyzed. And yeah, it's great, but ultimately you have to decide when to decide to make a decision and make sure that you have the right KPIs. And when I say right, it's not about volume. It's not about volume. It's not about variety. It's about having literally the right ones. And as I've seen on that point, it is organizationally about getting the right people focused on those things and not getting lost in the details, or it's probably, may sound a little cliche, being able to see the forest through the trees. And so I think for me, it's a balancing act. You absolutely have to have the right tools. I think that's just the only way. And I think field sales teams demand that, internal teams demand it. But I think from an analytics perspective, make sure you have the right people. Ultimately, the insights that you get, combined with great tools and the ability to execute that, will lead to what I've seen as the best outcomes. I think you can have you can way over balance or overcorrect, if you will, on people. You can do the same thing on technology. But to me, if you've got the right tools and combined with the right people, ultimately you'll be able to execute that. But that's just kind of my perspective on the tools and technology. Eric, I know you've been involved in a number of launches. I'd be curious where you saw, whether it's launches or just day to day, where you saw the best tools and the best insights lead to the best outcomes.
Wow. So I do have a fair amount to share with this. Over the course of my career, when I first started, we would have paper detail pieces. They would come, maybe you get 30, 35 pages, front and back color. They were 3-hole punched. This is a long time ago. Okay. They were 3-hole punched. And we would sit in a room and everybody would actually come up with their own detail. We would slide them into the paper, the clear paper sliders, and we'd flip them back and forth. And sometimes you'd use 2 or 3 because you wanted to emphasize a point. It was really up to you and the way you thought the presentation should go. And I think there's some regulatory issues with that probably came up. That's usually the motivation for almost everything in pharma anyway, from my experience. And then the computers came out. And you're right, David, there was a lot of emphasis on using the iPad. You always use the iPad. From the field force perspective, there were a lot of rumors going around about how they're tracking us with the iPad, and people were going through and making presentations with the iPad that weren't even real, and it was terrible because I think that headquarters, and this didn't happen just in one company, but happens across the board because every company talks to each other, and that data I think that that John might be referring to as you go, well, how did you make 45 presentations in one day, and a lot of these things were utilized in many cases because the word comes down. Headquarters says this, regional manager says this, manager says this, and you will do this or else. And when you put people in that arrangement, you're going to get whatever they think you want. And I think, unfortunately, when it comes down to the technology, there might be a lot of tracking that's going on that might be misleading people because they've received this amount of utilization and all that may not exactly be accurate. And I'm being honest with you. Who knows how many people I'm being honest with now? But the truth is, I just, for the benefit of everybody on this call and here, I think you have to really have that collaborative relationship with your field force to ensure that they're not just telling you what you want to hear in order to get through the day and make their number and so forth. I hope that answers some of your question. It comes down to your people, but it comes down to the collaboration. And I think that in the systems that I was using, it was a very top-down approach, and there was not a lot of upward feedback to say whether or not this was really going to be good and utilized. And finally, now in this new environment, it cannot be overemphasized that the tools that are given, and particularly in a sales presentation, they've got to be really relevant, to that doctor. And this is an easy thing to say, but a challenging thing to do, because I think that even when you're physically there with a doctor and in their office, or this doctor, who they see, their patient profiles, when they work, a lot about these people, it's still sometimes a challenge to ensure that the 3 or 4 minutes that you're going to get to spend with this person is really relevant for them. And what are we talking about? Are we talking about, is it dosing now that is important to you? Is it drug-drug interaction that's important to you today? Is it managed care coverage that's important to you today? What is it? And there are probably 6 or 7, 8 different variables that you can run with around a particular product. And my point is that with the technology, there has to continue to be this back and forth and this ability to implement change in order to ensure that the field force is getting what they need, and that they're also able to communicate that to the doctors effectively. As we go towards I'm running on here, but as we go towards a virtual engagement, I think we're all in love with this technology. I am too. But I do see a challenge in getting our customers to really adopt this technology, to really engage with it, and to say that, I'd rather have a virtual engagement with a rep than a physical engagement. As we get back into the field, in order to prepare for this, I did reach out. I spoke to a number of people that I know across different companies that are in pharma. And as we get back into the field, more doctors are saying, just come see me, as opposed to schedule an appointment through my office, the person who answers the phone, and then get them to talk with the office manager to approve it, and then get the medical assistant to look at the schedule and determine whether or not there is time that particular day, and then get the doctor's commitment to be there at a particular time, and so forth.
Yep.
Sorry.
We're at our time limit, Alex, I think.
Yes, unfortunately we are.
Yeah. I want to hear one. I've got, because Eric and John both brought it up in 10 seconds each at most, or especially for John. What I just heard you talking about was KPIs, and you get what you measure. Classically in this industry, it's been attainment, reach, and frequency. Is that still the right metric? Are you looking for new metrics, John, in particular, from home office?
Yeah, I think we're looking for new metrics. Reach and frequency are important depending on the phase of the launch. If you're trying to get awareness out there in the asset, but absolutely, depending on the phase of the asset and the treatment type and therapeutic area, we're always on the search for new metrics. And I think it's about finding the right metric for the right phase of the asset and the launch.
So reach and frequency plus, reach, frequency, outcome. Are we getting anywhere? And how often does this doctor really need to be seen? A lot of times the reach and frequency is decided on the doctor's ability to write more or less of the product. And that may or may not be the right number. It might be reach, frequency. What is our outcome? What are we actually accomplishing?
All right, perfect. Gentlemen, again, I would love to continue this conversation, but unfortunately we're out of time. And thank you so much for participating in the Digital Circle. Argo, sorry you had a little bit of a technical issue there, and we couldn't hear more from you. But we are all very excited of having you here, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in one of our next sessions.
Yeah,
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks,